Welcome to the lands of science fiction stories. I wish you a pleasant listening experience.
The imposing figure of Admiral Zarek Wraith stood at the helm of the Galactic Dominion's flagship, Harbinger of Stars. His reputation for ruthlessness was well earned. Entire systems had fallen before his relentless campaigns. Now, his gaze was fixed on a small, inconsequential planet at the fringe of the galaxy, Earth. A smirk played on his lips, his scaled fingers tracing the control panel before him. The Dominion had decided to test Earth's defenses, a planet rumored to be primitive and easy to conquer. It would serve as a strategic outpost, nothing more. "Tell me," Wraith purred, his voice a low rumble, "what are we dealing with?" "Scans show minimal resistance," a technician replied, his voice laced with boredom. "Their most advanced technologies appear to be rudimentary. Energy-based weapons, nuclear capabilities, laughable compared to our own. This will be swift, Admiral." Wraith nodded, his eyes glinting with predatory satisfaction. "Excellent. Prepare the troops." The fleet hovered ominously in the Earth's orbit, blocking out the stars with its sheer size. To the humans below, it was a silent storm of alien power waiting to strike. On board, the soldiers of the Dominion were ready, armored and armed, their reptilian features gleaming under the cold lights of the ship. Wraith gave the order. "Commence the operation. Begin the invasion." On the surface, a man named Ethan Drex watched the night sky from his remote cabin, oblivious to the impending threat above. A former biologist, Ethan had secluded himself after his research had been dismissed by the scientific community. His studies on Earth's smallest creatures, specifically the jellyfish species Morbicii, had been met with skepticism and ridicule. No one believed that such minuscule organisms could be of any significance. But Ethan knew better. A soft glow illuminated his cluttered lab as he peered into a microscope, observing a culture of Morbicii jellyfish in a small petri dish. Barely visible to the naked eye, they pulsed gently in the liquid. These creatures had fascinated him for years, their venom possessing an astonishingly lethal potency. It was a secret only he knew, and one the world was not ready for. Suddenly, his screens flickered with an alert, an energy disturbance in Earth's orbit. His eyes widened as data poured in, showing something massive moving above the atmosphere. "What the hell is that?" Ethan muttered to himself, his heart racing. Grabbing his communicator, he tried to reach anyone, in the scientific community, but the lines were down. Panic began to rise in him as he realized this wasn't just some astronomical anomaly. It was an invasion. On board the Harbinger of Stars, Admiral Wraith watched the initial landing of his forces with satisfaction. His soldiers moved swiftly, spreading out to secure key positions. They encountered little resistance at first, but something about the planet felt off. There was a stillness in the air, an unseen force that set Wraith's instincts on edge. "Admiral, we've landed near a dense coastal region. Shall we deploy reconnaissance drones?" a soldier asked. Wraith nodded. "Proceed." As the drones flew low over the waters, they sent back data of Earth's unique wildlife. The Dominion had encountered strange fauna before, but nothing of note. Then one of the drones focused on a small, pulsing shape drifting just below the surface. A jellyfish, no larger than a grain of sand. Wraith chuckled dismissively. "Worthless." The drone descended closer, scanning the creature. Suddenly, the screen went dark. The transmission cut off. Wraith blinked in surprise. "What happened?" "Unknown interference," came the reply. "It appears the drone was destroyed." "By what?" Wraith's voice darkened. "The jellyfish." A silence fell over the command deck. Wraith narrowed his eyes, not at all amused. "You mean to tell me that a jellyfish, a floating, brainless creature, destroyed one of our drones?" "Yes, sir," the technician stammered. "It's emitting some sort of energy field, disrupting our systems." Before Wraith could respond, more reports came in. Dominion soldiers collapsing near the coast, convulsing in agony. Medics rushed to assist, only to fall victim to the same fate. The screen filled with chaotic images of soldiers writhing on the ground, their bodies reacting violently to something unseen. "Impossible!" Wraith roared. "What is happening?" Back on Earth, Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief as his equipment picked up abnormal spikes in electromagnetic activity. The data pouring in from his remote instruments near the coast confirmed his worst fear. The jellyfish were reacting to the alien invaders. Somehow, the Morbicei's venom, an energy-based toxin, was interacting with the invaders' biology in catastrophic ways. "They don't know what they're dealing with," Ethan muttered, his mind racing. "They think they're gods among men, but these jellyfish?" He could hardly believe it himself. The very creatures he had been studying for years, dismissed by everyone, were now Earth's greatest defense. And the aliens were falling into their trap. Admiral Wraith watched in horror as more of his forces succumbed to the invisible onslaught. His pride, his ego, all the confidence he had brought into this invasion crumbled as his soldiers died without ever firing a shot. He slammed his fist into the control panel, his voice trembling with rage. Find out what's causing this now. But deep down he knew. He had underestimated this planet, this insignificant, backward world. And now, his forces were paying the price. Ethan, standing in his lab, knew the truth. Earth's deadliest weapon was something so small, so overlooked, that it had escaped even the most advanced scanners. And now, the aliens had learned the hard way. Sometimes, the smallest creatures held the deadliest power. Admiral Zarek Wraith paced in the control room of the Harbinger of Stars, his anger boiling beneath the surface. Reports from the ground continued to pour in. His forces were being incapacitated by an unseen enemy, and he had no answers. Alien pride was not something easily bruised, but Wraith felt the sting of humiliation creeping into his veins. "Have the scientists arrived?" he snapped at the communication officer. "Yes, Admiral. They are preparing to analyze the anomaly," the officer replied, fear lacing his voice. Wraith clenched his fists. "Tell them to make it quick. I won't have my army decimated by a microorganism." Meanwhile, down on Earth, Ethan Drex sat at his workbench, staring at the digital maps that displayed spikes of electromagnetic activity. It was clear that the Morbicei jellyfish were responding aggressively to the foreign invaders. Their venom, harmless to most terrestrial life, was proving to be a devastating weapon against the aliens. He paced back and forth, wrestling with the implications. Should he alert the military? Could they even understand the threat these microscopic jellyfish posed? In his hands, Ethan held knowledge that could either save humanity or lead it to extinction, depending on how it was used. Grabbing his communicator, Ethan decided to make contact with someone, anyone, before it was too late. In orbit, Admiral Wraith watched the screens as the alien scientists worked frantically, dissecting every bit of data from the battlefield. They had managed to capture a few of the tiny creatures in a sterile containment unit, but understanding how such insignificant life forms could cripple the mighty Dominion was proving elusive. "They look harmless," one of the Dominion's lead xenobiologists remarked, peering through a digital magnifier at the Morbicei specimen. "Harmless," Wraith growled. "They're annihilating my army." "Admiral, we are detecting a unique energy signature from these creatures," the scientist replied, his tentacles hovering over the glowing display. "It appears their venom reacts violently with our neurophysiological structure. It's as if they're designed to counter our biology." Wraith's eyes narrowed. "Designed?" The scientist hesitated. "Not literally, of course. But the match between their energy output and our neural pathways is eerily perfect. They're triggering neuroelectric discharges in our soldiers' brains, leading to paralysis, seizures, and ultimately, death. It's unlike anything we've encountered." "Then find a way to neutralize it," Wraith hissed. "Or I'll find someone who can." As the scientist scurried back to his equipment, Wraith's thoughts were racing. This planet was supposed to be an easy conquest, a stepping stone for greater glory. Yet now, he was locked in a silent battle with an enemy too small to see. His pride wouldn't allow him to retreat, not yet. Back on Earth, Ethan finally managed to establish a shaky connection with the closest military base. A gruff voice responded on the other end, demanding identification. "This is Dr. Ethan Drex," he said hurriedly. "You don't know me, but I have information on the aliens attacking. I believe I know how to stop them." There was a pause, then a click as the line switched to someone higher in command. Dr. Drex, this is Colonel Jansen. What do you mean, you know how to stop them? Ethan explained as quickly as he could, detailing his research on the Morbicii jellyfish and how their venom was likely the cause of the aliens' sudden losses. He could hear the disbelief in the colonel's voice, but the stakes were too high for anyone to dismiss his findings. So you're telling me, Jansen said slowly, that these aliens, who are wiping out everything in their path, are being taken down by jellyfish? It sounds ridiculous, I know, Ethan replied, his voice urgent. But I'm looking at the data right now. The venom from these jellyfish is disrupting their nervous systems. I can help, but I need access to more resources, technology, manpower, to amplify the effect. The line went silent for a moment. Ethan held his breath, hoping that the colonel would understand the gravity of the situation. Finally, Jansen spoke again, his voice tight with determination. All right, Dr. Drex. We'll send a team to your location. If what you're saying is true, you might just be our best shot at surviving this. On the Harbinger of Stars, Admiral Wraith's frustration continued to mount as the battle below unfolded. His forces were making no progress and morale was plummeting. Reports came in of entire squads being wiped out near the coastal regions, where the jellyfish population was densest. Wraith's jaw clenched as he stared at the tactical map. He wasn't about to let this planet defy him. He summoned his second-in-command, a towering figure named Krail, whose cold, calculating demeanor mirrored Wraith's own. Krail, prepare the ion disruptors. If these creatures are emitting energy fields, we'll wipe them out with a blast. Krail nodded. As you command, Admiral. The ion disruptors were the Dominion's most advanced weaponry, capable of neutralizing any form of energy on a molecular level. Wraith's plan was simple: obliterate the jellyfish, and crush any hope of resistance on Earth. As the disruptors powered up, Wraith allowed himself a rare smile. These humans were about to learn what true power looked like. Ethan watched as military vehicles approached his secluded cabin. The soldiers were cautious, their weapons drawn, but Ethan wasted no time. Come inside, he urged them. We don't have much time. The soldiers filed into his lab, their eyes scanning the chaotic setup of equipment and biological samples. Colonel Jansen followed, his stern expression softening as he listened to Ethan's explanation. You're saying these jellyfish could be weaponized? Jansen asked, eyeing the small, pulsing organisms under the microscope. Not in the traditional sense, Ethan replied. But their venom is a natural defense. If we can harness it and amplify its effects, we can target the alien's physiology. Then let's get to work, Jansen said, signaling his team to begin. We'll do whatever it takes. But as they began setting up the equipment, a low hum filled the air, a sound that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Outside, the sky began to glow, a faint blue light illuminating the horizon. What is that? One of the soldiers asked, looking to Ethan for answers. Ethan's face paled. That's an ion disruptor. They're going to wipe out the jellyfish. Colonel Jansen's face hardened. Then we've got to move faster. If we don't stop them, it won't matter what kind of venom those creatures have. The hum of the ion disruptor intensified, its light growing brighter as the alien weapon prepared to unleash its devastating blast. Inside Ethan Drex's cabin, the atmosphere was tense. Soldiers moved quickly, setting up amplifiers and cables, while Ethan frantically adjusted his equipment. His hands trembled as he wired the last piece together. This was their only chance. Colonel Jansen stood nearby, his eyes narrowing as he glanced at the window, where the ominous blue glow from the ion disruptor loomed on the horizon. How much longer, Drex? Just a few more seconds, Ethan muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. The device he had cobbled together was primitive, hastily built with whatever he could find. But if his calculations were correct, it would amplify the Morbicii jellyfish's venom, broadcasting its deadly signal across the coast. It was their only hope of neutralizing the aliens before the disruptor wiped out the very creatures that were their defense. Outside, the sound of the disruptor reached a fever pitch. Ethan connected the final wire. It's ready. Good, Jansen said, signaling his team. Everyone fall back to the perimeter. Prepare for counteroffensive. Ethan activated the device. The small petri dish containing the Morbicii jellyfish glowed softly, and a high-pitched hum filled the air. The energy field around the jellyfish began to expand, its frequency intensifying. Ethan's heart pounded as he watched the reading spike. "Come on, work." Up in the Harbinger of Stars, Admiral Wraith stood over the control panel, watching the display as the ion disruptors reached full charge. His lips curled into a satisfied grin. He could already imagine the sweet victory of crushing this planet, of reclaiming his reputation as a commander who had never tasted defeat. "Fire the disruptor," Wraith ordered, his voice steady and cold. The massive energy blast shot down toward the surface of Earth, aimed directly at the coastal region where the jellyfish thrived. It crackled through the atmosphere like a spear of light, unstoppable and lethal. There was no escape. But then, something unexpected happened. Inside Ethan's lab, the device screamed with power as it sent out the amplified venomous signal. The ground trembled slightly, and for a moment, the entire air seemed to shimmer. The amplified energy from the jellyfish venom collided with the incoming ion disruptor blast in a burst of light. "Look," one of the soldiers shouted, pointing toward the horizon. The disruptor's energy beam wavered, faltering as it struck the invisible barrier created by the jellyfish's venom. The two forces clashed, the blue light of the disruptor struggling against the deadly venomous energy field. The soldiers watched in awe as the seemingly fragile barrier held, pushing back the alien weapon's devastating power. "It's working!" Ethan shouted, his face lighting up with hope. On board the Harbinger of Stars, alarms blared as the disruptor failed to complete its destructive course. Wraith's eyes widened in disbelief as his most powerful weapon was neutralized by something. He slammed his fist into the console. "What is this?" "Admiral," the lead scientist stammered, "the energy from the jellyfish is disrupting the ion field. We cannot break through." Wraith's face twisted in rage. "Impossible. Increase the power. We've already pushed the disruptor to its limit. Any more and it will overload," the scientist replied, his voice shaking. Wraith's tentacles twitched in frustration. His invasion, his entire plan, was falling apart. And all because of a tiny, insignificant organism. On the surface, the soldiers watched as the disruptor beam began to fizzle out, the light dissipating as the jellyfish venom continued to surge through the atmosphere. A strange silence fell over the coastline as the alien weapon's power was drained completely. "We did it," Colonel Jansen breathed, lowering his rifle. "We actually stopped them." Ethan couldn't believe what he was seeing. His hands were still shaking, but a wave of relief washed over him. The venom, it's neutralized their entire attack. "We've pushed them back." Jansen clapped him on the shoulder. "You saved us, Drix. If it wasn't for you, we'd all be dead right now." Ethan shook his head, still in disbelief. "I didn't do it alone. Those jellyfish, they're the real heroes." As the sun began to rise over the coast, the tension finally started to lift. The soldiers relaxed, lowering their weapons, and Ethan took a deep breath. The danger seemed to have passed. For now. On board the Harbinger of Stars, Admiral Wraith stared at the display in stunned silence. His forces were in disarray, his weapon neutralized. His plan, his conquest, had failed. "Admiral," the communications officer said quietly, "we are receiving orders from the Dominion High Command. They are recalling us." Wraith clenched his jaw. The shame of retreat was too much to bear, but he had no choice. If he stayed, his forces would be decimated by this planet's tiny, unseen defenders. He had to live to fight another day. "Prepare for withdrawal," Wraith ordered through gritted teeth. "But mark my words. This isn't over." The Harbinger of Stars slowly turned away from Earth's atmosphere, limping back into the depths of space. Wraith's mind seethed with thoughts of vengeance. He had been bested by a planet he deemed primitive, but next time, he would come prepared. Ethan stood on the cliffside, watching as the alien fleet vanished into the sky. He could hardly believe what had just happened. Earth had been invaded, and yet, thanks to the tiniest creatures in the ocean, they had survived. "Think they'll be back?" Jansen asked, standing beside him. Ethan nodded slowly. "They will. But next time we'll be ready." He glanced back at his lab, the tiny jellyfish still glowing softly in their petri dish. Who would have thought that something so small, so easily overlooked, could hold the key to Earth's survival. As the sun rose higher, Ethan knew that this was just the beginning. There were countless secrets on Earth, mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. And the next time the aliens came, they would find that humanity wasn't so easy to conquer. After all, sometimes the deadliest creatures come in the smallest packages. The end.